sure what's good to read about tonight. Several books. I wanted to start with, this is book club invitation number 4, or number 5, I think. I can't remember. This is chapter... chapters are numbered. That's not relevant. It doesn't matter what chapter number it is. But it's shortly after the editor's introduction. We're talking about, I think this is the first part, the section on feeble-mindedness. The first section, this is right after the introduction. It's first section, fourth subsection, I guess, since there's not numbered chapters. We'll just call it the fourth subsection on secondary types of mental deficiency. And this is, of course, from the, if you're following along at home with the reading club, this is an outline of abnormal psychology, and this subsection is on idiot savants. We'll just start at the beginning. It's by a Dr. A.F. Treadgold, and it begins, Gottfried Mind was a Cretan imbecile who was born at Bern in 1768 and died in the same city at the age of 46 years. At an early age, he showed considerable talent for drawing, and as it was obvious that he would never be able to earn his living in any ordinary occupation, his father's employer interested himself in providing young Gottfried with some training. He could neither read nor write. He had no idea of the value of money. His hands were remarkable for their large size and roughness, and his general appearance was so obviously indicative of mental defect that his walks through the city were usually to the accompaniment of a crowd of jeering children. In spite of all his drawings and watercolor sketches of not only cats, but of deer and rabbits and bears and groups of children that were so marvelously lifelike and so skillfully executed that he acquired a European fame. One of his pictures, indeed, of a cat and kittens was purchased by King George IV, none other. And we'll just take this moment to note that this book was originally published in 1929. This is a book, this outline of abnormal psychology, edited by Gardner Murphy. As we've mentioned before, this is probably I can't remember, this is the second or third time we've read this on the book club. It was originally published in 1929. I don't remember where I bought this book, but anyway, I will keep going. So, this Gottfried Mind, the Cretan imbecile artist, had one of his pictures purchased by none other than King George IV in sometime between his birth in 1768 and his death 46 years later. So, under the heading of motor, we may describe those cases possessing, if not the gift of tongues, all the events of the extraordinary capacity of reproducing spoken words. Dr. Martin W. Barr describes an epileptic idiot aged 22 years old. This is another case, apparently. 2 years, who in spite of the most careful teaching could neither learn to read or write, although he was able to perform small domestic duties spontaneously. He hardly spoke at all, and then only in short, disconnected words or the simplest sentences. Today we'd probably call that autism or something. But he had an extraordinary capacity for repeating fluently and with proper intonation everything said to him, whether his mother tongue, or whether it was in his mother tongue or in such languages as Greek, Japanese, Danish, Spanish, etc. And it's probably those cases in which an imbecile will reel off cantos of poetry verbatim, also belonging to this category. As a considerable, in a considerable proportion to these idiot savants, the gift is one of memory in some form or another, and of this many interesting and remarkable examples have been described. Dr. Forbes Winslow mentions the case of a man who could remember the day when every person had been buried in the parish for 35 years and could repeat with unvarying accuracy the name and age of the deceased. and of the mourners present at the funeral. But he was not a complete fool, and out of the line of the burials, he had not one idea, could not give an intelligible reply to a single question, nor could he be trusted to even feed himself. Other cases show the existence of phenomenal memory in its simplest automatic form. Thus, there are many idiots who cannot speak a single word and yet can hum a tune, which they've only heard once, with perfect accuracy. Other immense will reel off poetry almost ad infinitum, yet without any understanding of the sense of the words they are saying or even the meaning of the words. A still more interesting case is described by Dr. L. Lottie of the Armentières, as that young man named Fleury, an inmate of the asylum, who was completely blind from ophthalmia neonatorum, but who developed the faculty of calculating to a degree little short of marvelous. For instance, he could give the square root of any number running into 4 figures in an average of 4 seconds, and the cube foot of any number running into 6 figures in 6 seconds. And he was asked how many grains of corn there would be in any one of 64 boxes, with 1 being the first, and 2 being the second, 4 being the third, 8 being the fourth, and so on. He gave the answers for the 14th, which was 8,192, for the 18th, 100,031.72. Then he gave the 24th, which was 8,388,608, instantaneously. And he gave the figures of the 48th box, which was a number too large, not even, it surpasses the trillions, in 6 seconds. And he also gave the total in all 64 boxes correctly in 45 seconds. And we may conclude in this chapter on idiot savants with an account of the following extremely interesting case: the genius of the Earlswoods Asylum. And from the year 1850 to 1916, there was a resident in the Earlswoods Asylum, a patient who justly earned this title, and whose skill in drawing, invention, and mechanical dexterity is certainly unequaled by an inmate of any similar institution in existence. And when I saw him at the age of 78 years, he continued to be actively engaged in his workshop. J.H. Pullen is the savant they're talking about. J.H. Pullen was admitted to Earlswood Asylum at the age of 15 years. On admission, he was found to be active and well-grown, but his speech was imperfect and he was very deaf. He was put to work at the carpenter's shop and soon became an expert craftsman. It was clear, moreover, that he possessed a capacity for initiation, imagination, resource, and attention far above the other inmates, and in consequence he was allowed considerable liberty of action and freedom to follow his own bent. The result after 60 years is to be seen in the 50 to 60 crayon drawings and carvings in ivory and wood and the wonderful models of ships and the like, which today still adorn the walls and fill the 2 large workrooms placed at his disposal in the Earlswood Asylum. Pullen designed and drew a pictorial history of his life, which shows his chief occupations between the years of 1841 and 1873. One of the most wonderful of his works, one of which he was the most proud, is the model of a steamship, which he named the Great Eastern. This, I think, he rightly regarded as his magnum opus, and it attracted universal admiration at the Fisheries Expedition, where it was shown in the year 1883. It took him 3 years and 3 months to complete, and every detail, including brass anchors, screw, pulley blocks, copper paddles, were all actually made by the patient from careful drawings which he prepared beforehand. The planks of this Leviathan were fixed to the ribs of the wooden pins in the number of nearly 1.25 million. All of these were made by Pullen in a special instrument, which in turn he also planned and made. He also devised and executed a strong carriage on 4 wheels for the conveyance of the ship. The model is 10 feet long, 18 5/8 inches wide, 13 5/8 inches in depth, and it contains 5,585 copper rivets, and there are 13 lifeboats hoisted on complete davits, each of which is perfectly finished model, and it's all fitted with paddles and screws and engines, and it contains state cabins which are decorated and furnished with chairs, tables, beds, and bunks. In fact, the whole thing is complete to the most minute detail and will bear the closest inspection. He also invented and attached an arrangement of pulleys by which the whole upper deck may be raised so as to show the parts below. I believe that when first put into the water, the huge model capsized, but that has since been remedied. It is perhaps hardly to be expected that a person with no knowledge of practical boat building should succeed in making a vessel that would be really navigable, but as a highly finished model, it is unmatched in its completeness. One of his highest pieces of work was the representation of a monstrous human form 13 feet high. A black-bearded, terrible-looking figure is armed with a gigantic sword and can be made to perform a variety of movements, such as opening and shutting of his mouth and eyes, protruding the tongue, rotating the head, raising the arms, by means of most elaborate internal mechanism. It is calculated to strike terror into the heart of any juvenile beholder. Of this, with the White Knight, he might truly have said, "It is my own invention." Other productions include bookcases, chairs, tables, workbenches, picture frames, and the like. In fact, the list of his work during the 66 years that he was in the asylum would alone fill several pages of this book alone. In disposition, Pullen was usually quiet, well-behaved, good-tempered. He seemed to be perfectly happy as long as he was allowed to work on his own ideas, when and how he pleased. He was intolerant of supervision, inclined to be suspicious of strangers, and easily affronted by injudicious busybodies. At times, he got a little out of hand, and if denied requests which were quite unreasonable, he was apt to become sulky and passionate. On occasion, he threatened to blow up the place because a request had been refused, and it's quite likely that he would have attempted to do so had he not been mollified. On another occasion, he did actually partially wreck his workshop in a fit of passion. Many years ago, there was a steward of the asylum whom Pullen took a violent dislike to, and he spent many days planning his destruction. This culminated in the erection over the door of a most diabolical instrument, which was intended to be a guillotine for the unfortunate officer, and there's not the slightest doubt that it would have done so had it not gone off a fraction of a second too late. He once became enamored of a female who he chanced to meet outside the asylum. Nothing would satisfy him but that he should have his discharge and be allowed to marry her. And he moped about, utterly refused to do any work or listen to argument or persuasion, and it became clear that the position was critical. A happy inspiration occurred to a member of the committee, and a gorgeous naval uniform resplendent in blue and gold was procured. Pullen was invited to the boardroom and informed that his case had been carefully considered and that it had been decided to accede to his request. At the time, it was pointed out to him that the committee would be exceedingly sorry to lose his valuable services, and that if he would reconsider the matter, they would, as an alternative, grant him a commission as an admiral in the Navy. The uniform was then shown to him as an earnest of their intention. This was much too much for Pullen, and he took the uniform and never afterwards alluded to the subject of marriage. And this uniform he usually donned on ceremonial occasions. A note in the casebook describes him as the quintessence of self-conceit and a consuming vanity and almost overwhelming sense of his own cleverness and importance are very marked characteristics, whatever. While showing me his handiwork, he frequently stopped to pat his head and say, "Very clever." And when I produced a tape measure and asked permission to ascertain the extent of his cranial capacity, he was delighted and evidently regarded me as a very sensible person. At the same time, in spite of his childish egotism, he was by no means deficient in some power of looking after himself, and on several occasions he was found selling privately and for his own advantage little articles he had made. Many of his works were carried out under a real or pretended idea that he had commissioned for them at a contract price. So that was one of these subsections on Idiot Savants, written by a Dr. A.F. Treadgold, originally coming from a book entitled Mental Deficiency, 4th edition, and this was reprinted by courtesy of the author of the publishers of William Wood Company, 1929. It's just an interesting thing to see, read about people that do art who are obviously insane and incapable of caring for themselves, but nevertheless institutionalized, I guess. In this case, he got away with a lot, so had a lot of people fooled or something. I don't know. Very interesting, though. Anyway, I think that's all. I've read a lot of this already. Anyway.